While we are waiting for some to come, would you like me to give you a quiz on some of what we've studied?
تحبوا يعمل لكم امتحان كده سريع على الحاجات اللي خدناها لغايه ما نركز
Okay. This is for Hanan because she has her interview coming up.
مين دخل دلوقتي بالايفون؟
I don't know who the iPhone is.
عشان اكتب الاسم بس. مين دخلت بالايفون دلوقتي؟ اعملي انت ميوت، اعملي ان ميوت.
انا جلاسكي مش ايفون.
لا في واحده دخلت بالايفون.
انا ماجدة.
مس فيولا.
Hello Magda.
ماجدة شنودة.
Hello Mr. Mike. I am Mimi.
Hello Mimi. Good to hear your voice.
Hello Mr. Mike. How are you?
I am well, thank you.
Hi Mimi. Hi Nadia.
Hi Miss Viola.
Hi حنان.
معلش ممكن تعملي ان ميوت وتقولي لي اسمك اللي بالايفون؟
مس فيولا.
ايوه ميمي حبيبي.
ايوه حبيبتي انا معايا ايفون.
لا انت موجود، اسمك موجود في واحده اللي هي جنبيكي على طول اللي صورتها بالايفون.
ماجدة شنودة.
لا ماجدة شنودة موجود اسمها. لا في واحده تاني داخله بالايفون مش عارفه اسمها عشان بس باخد الحضور.
انتصار الازرقي.
انتصار انت. طيب كويس اللي انا توتي مكلماكي. ماشي اوكي. This is new one.
Oh, very good. Welcome.
Intisar, this is the first time for her.
Okay, Hanan?
Yes.
Yes. When is the last day that you can send in your federal income tax?
April 15.
April 15.
April 15.
Yes. And name one of the rights that only citizens take a benefit from.
Vote.
One right.
Vote, Mr. Mike.
Vote, yes. They get to vote or they can run for a federal office.
Yeah.
Or join political party.
Yes. And let's see. How old do you have to be to vote for president?
From age 18.
18, very good. You're going to do wonderful on your test.
Thank you.
And what do we show loyalty to when we say the Pledge of Allegiance?
The United States or the flag.
And to the flag. Very good. I'm quizzing Hanan because she has her test coming up soon.
God with you, Hanan.
Thank you, Mimi.
And when must all men register for selective service?
Between the 18 and 26.
Oh, very good. You know the information very well.
Thank you.
Okay, well, since Hanan has her interview coming up soon, let me pray and then we'll go ahead and begin. Is that all right?
Okay.
Okay. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the opportunity to gather together. We thank you that everyone joining us is healthy tonight. We pray for Hanan and her family and for others who are going to be having their interview soon, that you will give them the ability to remember all of the information, that you will help them be calm and you will help them have peace, that you are with them, they're going to do fine. And we thank you for everything that you do in our lives. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Certainly. So we have some new people with us tonight. Welcome, those of you who are new.
Intisar, the first time to attend, yes. Ahmed Samir, I think this is the first time. Mimi also.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, you are all welcome. And let me just make a few statements to begin with. The class, we are in our, this will be the 5th session for this time, but we repeat it many times and then we make a video of the class and the lessons. And so from those videos, you can watch them as many times as you'd want to and refresh your memory for the information. And the videos are recorded so that you guys can study from them. And then you can come to the classes as often as we have them. We will repeat them. We will get through all of the lessons, all 100 questions, plus the reading and vocabulary. And then we will take a break and then we will go back and do it again. And you can come as many times as you want to any of the lessons. You can say all that, Viola, if you want.
هو بيقول ان النهارده الكلاس نمبر 5 وهو بيسجله وهحطه لكم على الواتساب تسمعوه، وممكن تدخلوا هيعيد تاني بعد كده كل البرنامج من اول وجديد، واللي حابب يدخل في اي كلاس يعني يحضر معانا ويلكم، يعني ما فيش مشكله. اوكي.
So Viola, is there anyone particular that you're waiting for still, or should we begin?
We can begin.
We can begin. Okay. Tonight's lesson, for those of you who have the materials, the papers are available to you, and Madam Viola can send them to you if you do not have them already. And we are going to begin on question number 58 tonight, and we will be going through it. I will put it up on the screen, and we will go through all of the information. If you have any questions while I am saying it, please do not hesitate to stop me and ask questions. The reason for doing this is because we want you to be able to learn it. It's not just for me to be able to say it.
I
Yes.
don't have question 58.
You don't have the papers for this? They're
Yeah.
in the same package with all of them.
After question 57, I have the history.
Yes, that's where question 58 begins.
Oh.
So you have that.
I'm looking for the number.
That's fine. It begins with the American history. Number 58 deals with the colonial period, and that's what we will look at tonight. And there are a lot of parts to that. So we will only go through the colonial, and we will end at question 70 tonight, which is just before the 1800s. So we're going to talk about the beginnings of the US. I will share screen and I will put the sheets up so you can see them. And do all of you have them? Are any of you missing the papers? If you're missing the papers, Madam Viola can get them to you. Okay, everyone has them? All right, I will share the screen. And here's where we're starting tonight. The earliest part of the US history is what they call the colonial period. They call it that because we were colonies of Great Britain, and it was before we became a country of our own. And those colonies existed in the 1600s and the 1700s until we had our War of Independence, or what we call the Revolutionary War. So we're going to go over that portion of the history. Okay. So question number 58 is what is one reason why the colonists came to America? And just so you know, they came from many countries, not just from one. They weren't all from England. They came from France. They came from the Netherlands. They came from Germany. They came from England. They came from many European countries. And there were many reasons why they came. You just have to remember one. One of the reasons was freedom. For them just to have freedom to do what they chose to do was the main reason. Some of them came because of politics. They did not want to be in the country where they were because of the political liberty they did not have. Many came for religious freedom. Some came because they wanted to be able to prosper or have economic opportunities. Some came because they wanted to practice their religion. And then many came to escape persecution. The same kind of religious persecution that goes on in the world today was going on at that time. And so many of them from all these countries in Europe came to the US for a brand new start.
Some of them came for the gold.
That was later, but yes, they did. In the 1800s, there was the gold rush. They came for the gold. You're right. And actually, in the 1500s, some from Spain came for the gold. There were explorers. We were not a country then, but they called them the conquistadores. They were the people who came from Spain, and they came to Mexico. They came to North America. And yeah, they were looking for gold. But the colonies were started because they had a desire for freedoms. And you just have to remember one of these. Freedom, political liberty, religious freedom, economic opportunity to practice their religion and to escape persecution. So that's question 58. Any questions on that? Okay. All right, so
What is escape persecution? Can you explain that?
certainly, they were being punished for believing differently than the country wanted to believe. For example, in England, they had the Church of England, and if you did not practice that religion, you were put in prison, you were fined, you were beaten, all sorts of reasons. And so those who wanted to believe differently than the Church of England, they came to America, or they came to the colonies so that they would not be persecuted anymore.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, the next question, number 59, is who lived in America before the Europeans arrived? There are two different ways to say the answer. It's the same answer both ways. We call them American Indians, so that they are different or not thought to be the Indians from the East, like from the country of India. We call our Native Americans Indians. So both answers are the same and are correct. American Indians or Native Americans. There were many tribes of Indians. They were not all from one tribe. They were not all the same. Any location in the US you went to, you probably would find a different tribe. And some of the names you're going to have to learn, because you're going to have to name some of them. And I'm going to read off some of these that are on the page just so you can hear the pronunciation. The Navajo, I'll highlight it right here. The Navajo was one of those. And the J is pronounced like an English H, so Navajo. This one is very difficult. It's a Indian pronunciation or a Native American pronunciation. It looks like it should have a different sounds to it, but they pronounce it Sioux, just like an S-U, Sioux.
All are consonant.
Yeah. Well, there's 3 vowels in a row and just a consonant at the beginning and at the end.
Yeah.
And then the next one is Cherokee. And these are Native American words. So they are not English, they're not French, they're not. Iroquois is the next one. Iroquois. And there are many different names that you'll also hear later on, like Apache and Shoshone and Creek. I mean, there's a whole bunch of other tribes, but you don't have to learn those now. Now, all you have to know is what we called all of them together when we referred to them. And they were either American Indians or Native Americans. And they were here before the Europeans arrived. Okay.
Mr. Mike,
Yes.
why they called American Indian? Why at the end has a, Indian?
It's a very good question. When Columbus left and sailed to find the New World, he thought he was heading to the East Indies or to India. He thought he was discovering a route to India. And when he arrived on the North American continent and he found natives who were living there, he thought at first he was in India. And when the settlers first came, they still used the name Indian because that was where they thought that they had landed, but they did not. And it just stuck. It just became the way that they referred to them. So it's an error for them to be called Indians when the country of India already had Indians. But it's, like I said, it stuck. It became the name that they were called by. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right, question number 60. What group of people were taken to America and sold as slaves? Now, this is one of the unhappy parts of our history that many people don't want to acknowledge. Slavery existed long before America. In countries around the world, even within Africa, tribes would conquer one tribe and make them their slaves. This happened with the Romans. It happened with the Greeks. It happened with the Babylonians. I mean, when one would conquer another, they would make the slaves of those who were conquered. We, as a country, there were people who would go to the west coast of Africa, and they would pick up Africans, and they would bring them here, and they would sell them as slaves. And like I said, it's not a happy part of our history, but it is part of our history. We can't deny it or ignore it. And question number 60 is, what group of people, in other words, what do we call all of the people that were sold as slaves? We call them either Africans or people from Africa. Both are the same answer for question number 60. And just by way of understanding, there were other people who were also slaves during that time that came from other countries, but the largest population of them were Africans. And on the test, they will ask you what group of people was taken to America. It's because they were the largest group. They were the Africans or the people from Africa. In fact, we had a civil war in the 1800s, which we'll talk about next week, to free all of the slaves. Because we do not believe in this country in slavery, even though this country started, or even before it was a country, there were people brought here to be slaves. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Now we get to the reason for independence. Question number 61. Why did the colonists fight the British? Why was it that they wanted their independence? Or why was it we wanted our independence? The colonies were run by Great Britain, and Great Britain had governors and other people who were managing the colonies in this country, but they were charging taxes and they were not giving the people any say in those taxes. So that is the term taxation without representation. So one of the reasons the colonists fought Great Britain or the British was because of high taxes or taxation without representation. Another reason was the British Army would come and they would use people's houses as a place to put their soldiers. So it would be like everybody coming to Farzana's house because she has a real big house, and they would say that they're going to put all of the soldiers for that area in Farzana's house.
No way.
No way. But they did that in the colonies, and the colonists could not say anything about it. So they just kicked the family out and said, soldiers are going to live here. And they called that quartering soldiers. And so they fought Britain because they didn't want that to happen anymore. And then the other reason was because they wanted to be governing themselves. They wanted self-government. They wanted to be governed or have a different set of rules to decide how things are done in this country. And so they created what's called the Declaration of Independence, which we'll get to in a few minutes. And the war to fight Great Britain, you'll see it right here. It was called the Revolutionary War because they were in revolution against Great Britain. And it began in 1775 and it ended in 1783. So it went on for 8 years, and it was, and you have to understand, back then there was not modern warfare, so they did not fight during the winters. Everybody wintered in a certain place, and they did not do battle in winter because armies couldn't move. There were frozen rivers, frozen lakes, frozen ground. Winters were very harsh on the East Coast, and so fighting mostly happened during the spring and the summer months. So it made the war last longer than it would have lasted anyway. Nowadays, people fight all year round. So any questions about why the colonists, and they were not a country yet, why the colonists fought for their independence? All right, when the colonists got together, they had what was called a convention, and the convention were representatives from every one of the colonies. And they had 2, sometimes 3 representatives from all of the colonies who decided they were going to rebel against or have a revolution against Great Britain. One of the men that was part of that conference or convention was a man named Thomas Jefferson. He also was the 3rd president of the United States. but because he was also one who knew how to write very well, put words together very well, he was the one that they asked to do the main writing for the Declaration of Independence. Other people from the convention worked with him, but he wrote most of it. And so question number 62 is, who wrote the Declaration of Independence? And the answer is Thomas Jefferson. If you ever go to Washington, D.C., you will find that there is a monument to Thomas Jefferson. It's a very beautiful monument, and it has a very large statue of him in the center of it. And around the room, there are sayings of his. He not only was the author or the main author of the Declaration of Independence, he wasn't only just the third president, he was also the first Secretary of State. And you remember that we talked about the different cabinet positions. The Secretary of State was one of the original cabinet positions, and he was the first one to serve in that role. And let's see what else about him. He also believed that the government should be run by the people, and the Declaration of Independence states that. And when it came to the Constitution, he had a very large voice to make sure that the government didn't run everything, that the people were certain to have a voice. So the answer to 62 is, who wrote the Declaration of Independence? Thomas Jefferson. And if you can only remember his last name, Jefferson, that would be good enough. Now, you heard me say that the Revolutionary War began in 1775. It did, and in July of 1776, the Declaration had been finished writing by Thomas Jefferson, and he brought it to the convention, or to the Congress, which is what they call it, and that Continental Congress read it, and 12 of the 13 colonies met in Philadelphia to agree on it. And those who agreed to it, they signed their names. One of the most important phrases from the Declaration of Independence was one of the phrases that you may have heard spoken before. It's the one that I have highlighted here. Oh, by the way, all of these men on the bottom, when they signed the Declaration of Independence, they knew that they were making themselves an enemy of Britain. So all of them, by just putting their signature on the bottom of this document, were hunted and wanted men. It meant that they were, their lives, if the British were to find them, they would be executed. And so all of the names down here were very brave men who said, I believe this strongly enough that I'm going to put my name to it. And one of the statements in here that's very, very well known is, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, among which are the pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness. That's a very famous statement. In fact, one of your questions earlier is, what does the Declaration of Independence declare, or what does it speak to? And you have to remember life, liberty, or the pursuit of happiness. So you're hearing some of the same information as you heard before. And in 1776, on July 4th, the colonies all agreed to accept the Declaration of Independence, and they read it before the people for the first time. So the answer to number 63, when was the Declaration of Independence adopted? July 4th, 1776. And if you've been in this country long enough, you have seen all the fireworks and all the celebration that goes on the 4th of July. That's why it happens, because we are remembering our independence. And I know the countries that you came from, many of you have Independence Days also, where you became independent from whoever was governing or ruling in that country before. And so I know you're not unfamiliar with the concept, with the idea of it. Any questions on the Declaration of Independence?
في حد عنده سؤال في إعلان الاستقلال؟ Declaration of Independence اللي هو إعلان الاستقلال. في معلش sorry Mr. Mike, I want to ask about someone joined by VOR. What's your name? VOR. Can you unmute and tell me your name, please? The last one. But anyway, that's okay.
Me, I am Intisar Azraqi.
Intisar, I already put you. There is another one with VOR computer, laptop.
Oh, it's a laptop.
Laptop, yes, VOR. I can see VOR.
Yeah, I don't know who that is.
فيولا مو طالعة السكرين تبع الأسئلة، ها مو طالعة عنا معارضة.
احنا موقفين، هو دلوقتي
آه.
دخل.
بعرف، بس قبل ما كانت طالعة عندي، مشان هيك عم يفتح بس ما طلعت.
صحيح؟
من الكتاب عم بقرا، مشان هيك بس قلت هلا صار فاصل. كان عم يفتح بس ما طلعت ابدا، يعني عم بيحمل بس ما حمل.
يبقى في حاجة، في مشكلة في النت.
All right, I'll go back to sharing and go on with the lesson then. Okay, when the United States was first founded, as I said before, there were 13 colonies, and the colonies were mostly on the east coast of the U.S. Actually, all of them were on the east coast. Some of them had a little bit more inland part to them, and here is the list of them. The picture of the U.S. at that time. In fact, I will put it up here larger. The picture of the U.S. at that time, you can see all of the darker color here is where the colonies were. And they were, they owned more territory or less territory than the states do right now. For example, here's New York, and New York is much larger. It actually takes in all this space up here too today, but it was a much smaller state back then. So you can see what size they were when the colonies existed. And they came, like Georgia, for example. Georgia takes up all of this space today, but it was a very small colony. And so the question that is number 64 is, there were 13 original states after they were colonies. Name 3 of them, and I'm going to pronounce them so that you can hear the pronunciation of them. In fact, I'll make this just a little bit larger so you can see all of them. And I'm going to read them here. There's New Hampshire, Delaware, Massachusetts, which is a fun one to hear Arabic speaking and Farsi speaking people pronounce because it's got different sounds to it. Massachusetts, Maryland, Rhode Island, I'm over here, Rhode Island, Virginia, Connecticut, North Carolina, New York, South Carolina, New Jersey, Georgia, and Pennsylvania. And you have to remember 3. And this is where Viola cheats because she remembers just the word new. She figures if she gets New Hampshire, New York, and New Jersey, she's okay.
The easy one, the easy way.
The easy way.
دول 13 ولايات اللي هم ابتدوا الكولوني لما جم هربانين من اوروبا، بدوا ال 13 ولايه دول اقدم 13 ولايه. فهو هيطلب منكم في الامتحان 3. اسهل حاجه انك تحفظوها بالنيو. نيويورك، نيو جيرسي،
New Hampshire. Yes, the 3 news. And if you want to try the hard to pronounce ones, that's fine. Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, and Connecticut. If you want a challenge, try and remember all of those. But you'll have to remember 3 of them, and they became states at different times. They didn't all become states at the same time. And you can see down below in the paragraph, it says 8 colonies became states in 1788. And then it says that others became like North Carolina in 89 and Rhode Island in 1790. So they did not all become states right away, but they did. And this was all after the Revolutionary War. And then today we now have 50 states. And we will talk about that when we take a look at our flag and take a look at the geography, because we will go through the geography. And so you can see where all the states are, and you're going to have to learn states that are on the border of Canada, states that are on the border of Mexico, you're going to have to remember some of those names. So we'll go through all the geography and you'll see where the 50 states are. And I will pronounce them for you so that you learn how to pronounce them well. Okay, that's question number 64. 65 is what happened at the Constitutional Convention. After the end of the Revolutionary War, they knew that they needed principles and a document that would tell them how the country was supposed to be run. And the word that they used for that document was the Constitution. And it was written by a group of men who came together. There were 55 of them from the states. And they first created a document called the Articles of Confederation, but that document was not going to serve the purpose very well. So soon after that, they wrote another one that became called the Constitution. And so the question is, what happened at the Constitutional Convention? There are two answers for it. Both of them are basically the same. You only have to give one answer. Is the Constitution was written, or the Founding Fathers, all of these delegates from the different states got together. The Founding Fathers wrote the Constitution. So basically what happened at the convention? They wrote the Constitution. And the Constitution itself is today a very large document, but in the beginning, it wasn't as large. It covered just basic ways of managing and running the government. There were different articles. And then after it was accepted, there were amendments that were made to it. And you remember we talked about the Bill of Rights, which were the first 10 amendments. And now there are 27 amendments to the Constitution. So anybody have any questions on that? 1787 is when it was ratified, and that actually is is when it was written. That actually is the next question. When was the Constitution written? 1787. So a very matter-of-fact answer. Not difficult to remember, but you have to remember the right year. Okay, this one can get confusing. I always enjoy the way that Viola pronounces one of these names. The Federalist Papers, this is question 67, were papers that after they voted to accept, or after the Constitution was written, they needed to have so many of the states agree to it. And there were a lot of states that had slaves, and there was a debate whether or not there should be something in the Constitution to outlaw slaves. But they knew that they wanted to be able to create a nation with as many states as possible. So some things that they talked about did not get in the Constitution to begin with. And so the Federalist Papers, once the Constitution had been written, were papers that were authored by people who wanted to make sure that the Constitution was ratified, which means that the states agreed to it. And the papers that were written to try and convince people to vote in favor of the Constitution are called the Federalist Papers. And they had 4 authors. Actually, they had 3, and they also used what is called a pseudonym, a pen name, a false name for so that they would not be identified in their writings. And the names were James Madison, who also became a president, Alexander Hamilton, who was the first treasurer of the United States, and a man by the name of John Jay, who served as a Supreme Court justice. Alexander Hamilton and James Madison also used a pen name, Publius, which is a funny word. It's a word actually from the Latin or the days of the Romans. And it was a name to disguise who was actually doing the writing. And all 3 of them used it a little bit, but mostly Alexander Hamilton and James Madison. So these essays explained why they thought the Constitution was a good idea. And the Federalist Papers were very instrumental and very important in convincing people. You have to remember that in the 1700s, especially the late 1700s, there was no news broadcast. There was no Twitter. There was no text messaging. There were no emails. And so the newspaper and articles written in newspapers were the main way that people found out information. And so what they did was they would write, it would be published in newspapers to convince people that the Constitution was a good thing. I don't know if you want to explain any of that, Viola, or if there's any questions. You're muted.
في أي سؤال عندكم في الجزء ده؟ هو عايز يقول إن بعد ما الاستقلال، إعلان الاستقلال تم، اللي هو كان 4 جولاي، اتكتب الدستور اللي هو الكونستيتيوشن. فسنة الكتابة بتاعته كانت اللي هي 1778 تقريبا. الناس اللي كتبت ابتدوا يكتبوا ورق علشان الناس تروح وتنتخب. كان 1787 سوري.
87.
الثلاث افراد اللي هم قاموا بكتابه هو مين اللي كتب الدستور؟ كان توماس جيفرسون. لكن هنا الفيدرال بيبرز 3 اللي هو جيمس ميدسون والكسندر هامilton وجون جي. وفي حاجه اسم كان مستعار ليهم هم ال3 علشان ما يحصلهمش مشاكل، اللي هو بيبيلس.
Okay.
حد عنده سؤال طيب في الجزئية دي؟ جزئية كتابة الدستور وإعلان الاستقلال والكلام ده اللي هو شرحه. Okay.
All right. The people that were part of the Constitutional Convention were of all different ages. Thomas Jefferson was a younger man. Alexander Hamilton was a younger man. Most of these men were in their 30s. The oldest one was a man by the name of Benjamin Franklin. And question number 68 deals with who Benjamin Franklin was. And he was very important in the beginning of our country. He served as an ambassador, which is why one of the answers that you must remember is, it says, what is one thing Benjamin Franklin is famous for, is he was a diplomat. He served in France, trying to get the French to help us during the Revolutionary War. He was the oldest member of the Constitution Convention, and now he was in his 60s, which for those of us who are in 60s or 70s doesn't sound very old to us. But in those days, that was a very old man. And so he was very instrumental or very important in helping getting people to be convinced that America deserved to be a country. He also was the one who started the Postal Service. He was the first postmaster. So when you go to the post office and you mail a letter, it all started with Benjamin Franklin. He was the first Postmaster General, which was the person in charge of the Postal Service, and he helped start that. He was an author, and he wrote a book called Poor Richard's Almanac, which was a book of wise sayings, as well as a book that recorded scientific things, like when the moon was going to be in full or quarter or half. He wrote about the harvest seasons, and a lot of things were in Poor Richard's Almanac. So he authored a book. He also, I don't know if your children, I would imagine so. Everything seems to be online nowadays, but when I was a child, the only way you got books other than buying them was to go to the library. Yeah, and he was the first one to start a free library service, which meant you could go in and you could present your name, you could borrow a book for a period of time and then return it, and it didn't cost you at all to do it. We still have that library system today. You can go and you can borrow a book, and a lot of those books are donated to the libraries by people who are passing away, and they leave their library to the city library. But the person who started that process was Benjamin Franklin. So you need to remember one of these, and the answers you can give are: he was a diplomat, he was old, he was the first Postmaster General, he wrote Poor Richard's Almanac, or he started the first free libraries. And like most of us, he won't be offended if the only thing you can remember is he was old.
هو كان أقدم واحد في اللي كتبوا الدستور، بس كان سنه 60 سنة، فبيقول يعني ما كانش كبير قوي. بس هو عمل حاجتين مهمين جدا جدا. هو طبعا
look at the baby.
أهم حاجة دايما بتتكتب عنه إن هو US دبلومات، دي اللي مشهور بيها قوي. لكن هو عمل حاجتين مهمين جدا جدا. أول واحد أنشأ البوسطة، البوست ماستر جنرال، وأول واحد بدأ المكتبات اللي هي started the first free library.
Yeah.
دول أهم حاجتين عملهم. بس دايما في الإجابات بتختار US دبلومات لأن دي أسهل واحدة.
Okay. Viola, while you were talking, you were being upstaged by Farzana's little baby.
Where is Farzana? I didn't see it.
You didn't see the baby? Oh, you need to see the baby. As a grandma, you need to see the baby.
Farzana, show it to me.
Here is my baby.
Oh my God. Boy? Boy? Farzana, boy or girl?
Girl.
Girl.
Yes.
Oh, she's so cute.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
Like
They-
mom.
They grow up so fast.
Yes.
Okay, so that's Benjamin Franklin. We only have a few more questions. We'll go through those.
Yeah.
In fact, we only have a couple more. We have several people who played very key roles in the founding of our government, but one person stands out more than any other because of the different things that he did. George Washington is his name, and we have our government centered in a place called Washington, D.C., named after him. We have a state named Washington that is named after him on the West Coast. In fact, most states have a city in it that is named Washington. Most cities have a street in it that is named Washington. So you will find the name Washington everywhere, and it's because of this man, George Washington. He is called the father of our country, and he is called that because he not only served as the very first president by unanimous consent. In other words, everybody said, oh yeah, he's the one. He's the one that has to be the first president. He has to show everyone how it needs to be done the right way. And he was also the general of the army when we defeated the British to win our independence. So he was very, very, like I said, very key, very instrumental in our country being founded. He was known as a gentleman, meaning that he had a farm and he wasn't wealthy, but he had means. And so he never took a salary to be the president, and he never took a salary to be the general of the armies. He was able to be away from his farm and do both of these things, and he did it to show how much he loved our new country, but he didn't do it for money.
Mr. Mike, please, you are muted.
I didn't do anything to mute myself. We have only had one other president who refused to take any wages. And that was most recently our 45th president did not take any wages for being president. George Washington was the only one before that who didn't take any wages to be president. And there is a salary that is assigned for the president. Congress has established what that is. And he refused to take it because the country was brand new. And most recently, Donald Trump refused to take it out of principle because he didn't need it and he wasn't going to take money when he didn't need it. The other thing about George Washington is when he was elected, he served 2 terms, 2 4-year terms. After he served the second 4-year term, they wanted him to serve another. And he felt it was inappropriate or it wasn't in the best interest of the country for someone to stay the president too long. Because if he did stay in that office too long with all of his favorite people in the cabinet, then other people would not get as much of a voice. So he served 2 terms, and we've only had one other president that was elected to serve more terms, and that was Franklin Roosevelt. We'll learn about him later. He actually was elected to 4 terms, but after he passed away during his 4th term, they made a rule, a new amendment, and that amendment limited a president to only 2 terms. So a president can only serve 8 years, whether they're 8 years together or 8 years separated by a space in between. They can only serve 8 years or 2 terms. And the one who set the precedent for that, set the form for the way that should be done, was George Washington. So question 69 and question 70 have the same answer, George Washington. He was very, very instrumental in the beginning of our country.
Mr. Mike,
Yes,
you said we called father of country. So because he was the first president, that's why we call father of our country?
for multiple reasons. That is one of the reasons. The other reason is he was the general that led the armies in our Revolutionary War against the British. So he fought for it, and he actually served afterwards as the first president. So both of those reasons.
Yeah, because there might be a lot of general, you know, and they fight on that time.
Yes.
So
But
that
he-
was, you know,
yeah,
father of our country. And
Yeah, he wasn't just a general. He was the commander of all of the armies. So there were many generals, but he was the commander of the Continental Army. And I know it may be difficult to picture, but the army back there was mostly volunteers. Many of them did not receive any pay. They were fighting for independence. And I'll give you a good example. Right now, there are many Ukrainians that are fighting for their country not to be taken over by the Russians. And I don't know where you stand politically on that, so I'm not trying to have a political discussion. But many of the people who are fighting are not soldiers. Many of them have not been trained as part of the army. They are fighting for their country to stay independent. And that was the way the army was that George Washington led during the Revolutionary War. Now, there were some who became trained soldiers, but most of them were militia. Most of them were people from their homes who decided, I agree, we should be independent. The leader that pulled all of those people together was George Washington. So he was more than just a general. He was very instrumental.
yes, got it. Yeah, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Dr. Mike, I have a question, please.
What was that?
I have a question, please, Dr. Mike.
Please, go ahead.
There is a question in the application. It's what is the form of the government? And the answer can be sometimes I heard that sometimes a republic, sometimes the constitution. What is the perfect one?
Okay, if you say that we are a republic, that is a good answer. And to say that we are a constitutional republic means that we are a republic that has a constitution as the guiding document to tell us how to behave. Or to say that we are a constitutional government would be an acceptable answer, because it isn't left to the leader, the singular leader, to decide what the government does. It's based on a document that everybody agrees to. So a republic is also a representative government, which means the people get a voice. So that's what those terms mean. And so if they say what form of government, you could say it is a republic. And if they say what does that mean, it's a representative republic, which means we have people's voice listened to, and we vote for our leaders. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you so much.
Uh-huh. Okay, there's a lot of information that I delivered tonight, and I don't want to bury you with more information. The 1800s we will take on next week, but of all the things that we've covered, just like with Hanan right then, is there anything that you have questions on that I can answer?
No, thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. And I will make this tonight into a new video so that you will be able to view it again for any of the answers. And they go up on YouTube, so you'll be able to watch them as frequently as you want to. No other questions. And those of you who are brand new, if you do not have these papers that I'm showing, please make sure that you get them from Madam Viola, because
I will send it.
yes.
انتصار مين أول مرة يحضر معانا النهاردة؟ The first time.
Very good.
First time attending. انتصار وميمي هبعت لكم الأسئلة. مين تاني؟
Very good. Well, I'm so happy to have you guys join us.
Viola?
Yes.
Hi, كيفك؟
كويسة. ازيك يا جمانة؟
الحمد لله. بدي اسالك شو هي اللي سالت اخر سؤال، انا ما فهمت شو مشان الريبريزنتيف ريبابليكان، شو هي؟
اللي هي شكل الحكومة اللي في الوقت الحالي، هل ديمقراطيين ولا شعبيين؟
بس هو ديمقراطيك، ليش هي عم تقول ريبابليك؟
ديمقراطيك، هي ديمقراطيك.
ليش هي عم تقول ريبابليك؟ لازم نقول شو؟ ما
لا
فهمت عليها.
Jumana asking about the form of the government now.
Oh, okay.
Republican or Democrat?
Well, the president is a Democrat, but we have a government that is a republic, a constitutional republic, or a representative democracy. All of those terms mean the same thing, and all of them describe who we are.
Yeah.
So you can use those terms interchangeably.
يعني فينا بس نقول ديمقراطيك ما؟
الرئيس الحالي دلوقتي ديمقراطي.
اوكي، بس مجلس الشيوخ هو ريبابليكان.
لكن في برضه في نفس الوقت في ريبابليكان. مش كل الشعب ديمقراطي، لكن في جزء كذا ديمقراسي وفي جزء ريبابليكان، لكن الوضع الحالي الرئيس نفسه ديمقراطي.
اوكي، بس هم يسالونا شو الحزب الحاكم، نقول لهم ديمقراطي بس.
بالضبط كده.
اوكي.
لا، شكل الحكومة ريبابليك.
بس هنا عم بيسالوك عن هذا، عن الحكم كله، انه مين مين اللي بيمثل
البريزيدنت.
لا، هم يقولوا الحكومة، شكل الحكومة.
هو السؤال ده فين؟ انا السؤال ده ما عداش عليا، ده فين ده يا حنان؟
الابلكيشن يمكن عم تقول
ده الابلكيشن يا فيولا، بس السؤال دوت اجابته ملهاش دعوه خالص بالديمقراطيك وريبابليك. دي شكل الحكومه اسمها ريبابليك، اور زي ما مستر مايك قال اللي هي government كونستيتيوشن ريبابليك، والثالثه قالها برضو بس انا ما خدتش بالي منها، بس انا حفظتها انها ريبابليك.
The please, Mr. Mike, can you explain it again because they mix it up about the.
All right, are they looking at a specific question?
Yeah, the specific question, what is the form of the governor right now?
Okay, there are several ways to say the same thing. You can say that we are a democratic republic. You can say that we are a representative democracy. Those are all the same, mean the same thing. What it means is the people have a voice. You can say that we are it's not a Republican or Democrat. Those are parties. That's not the answer. The answer is that we are a democracy, but we have representation in our democracy. So the words of the words I know sound like they could be confusing, but we have a representative democracy or a representative republic. Both of them mean the same thing.
Yes. يعني عندنا ممثلين representative democracy وعندنا representative اللي هم ممثلين يعني للريبابليكان. ده لو سأل عن الحكومة، لكن مين اللي في الوضع الحالي الحزب الأحزاب اللي بيتبع للرئيس؟
حامل مين الحزب الحاكم هلا؟ هو الديمقراطيك.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, very good. Thank you all for being with us tonight. And I hope you all have a wonderful week. And we will see you all again next week. Those of you who are new, again, I welcome you and I look forward to seeing you again. May God bless your week.
Thank you.
You too. Thank you.
Bye-bye now.
Thank you, Mr. Mike.
You are very welcome.
بالتوفيق يا حنان، نصلي لك إذا الله راد.
تعيشي ميرسي خالص يا عفان، تعيشي حبيبة قلبي.
هتمتحني امتى يا حنان؟
الاثنين الجاي ان شاء الله.
الاثنين الجاي.
بالتوفيق ان شاء الله بنسمع اخبار حلوه يا رب.
And Farzana, thank you for sharing your daughter with us.
You're welcome.
Bye.